Sounds great. Welcome, everybody. My name is Marty Mascari. I am a contractor under the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the North Central Texas Aging and Disability Resource Center, or ADRC, both of which are under the umbrella of the North Central Texas Council of Governments in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. We are blessed once again to have one of our star presenters, Dr. Ron Mottern, to present the 3-hour version of avoiding burnout in organizations working with older adults. I don't know, some of you probably were on 2 months ago when we did this topic, but we did an abbreviated version. And so I've asked him to come back and do the full version. I had just really great response from the people that joined us last time. As during this webinar, if you have any questions, I'm going to ask you to put questions in the Q&A and comments in the chat. It just makes it substantially easier, more time efficient when we get to answering questions. If the questions are in the Q&A and not, we don't have to filter through the chat to find out if anybody had any questions. So please use the Q&A for any questions you might have. So before we get started, we're going to talk about CEUs. Dr. Mottern, first of all, there's going to be 2 surveys. Dr. Mottern has a survey link at the end of actually not his presentation. It's on a slide towards the end, a link to a survey that he would like you to complete, and we surely would encourage you to please complete that for him. In addition to that, those people that are on today looking for CEUs or a certificate of attendance, we are offering CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in the state of Texas. If you have a different license in Texas or you have a license outside of Texas, you're more than welcome to go through the process and get the certificate and well, something get the certificate and I'm sorry, there's the slide we're showing, Doctor, isn't the correct one. So that's all right. You get the certificate and then go through the process and get the certificate and provide it to your jurisdiction. But please note that that is up to them whether they'll accept it, and we're not set up with that. Today's webinar is worth 3 CEU hour credits. You must attend both the morning and afternoon session in order to be eligible for CEUs. We do not provide partial CEUs. You must complete the entire webinar live in the Q&A. You must also complete the Google survey evaluation, which should pop up as you close out of the afternoon session when we're all done. Zoom should give you an opportunity to take a short survey, and that is our Google survey for CEUs. The survey link will also go out in an email, a follow-up email tomorrow, and the link will be up for a week from tomorrow. It will be available. Please give me a month after that to get the CEUs out to you. Please do not contact Dr. Mottern for CEUs. He is a speaker for us and has nothing to do with them. And please don't bother him with them. I would appreciate it. If you want to move on to the next slide. Oh, and as we do that, one last thing, you will receive the login information for the afternoon session after we have finished the morning session. And I do that in order not to confuse you, not to confuse anybody and have them try to use the wrong link to get in. So once we complete this one, you'll receive another email from me with a link to this afternoon session. Dr. Mottern, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry if I got the wrong, if I opened up the wrong slide there. I noticed the dates on it where the dates on it were from the last one, I think. But
it's all right.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah, just to reiterate what Marty said there, at the end of this, there is a survey on the slides there. If you enjoyed the presentation, then please fill out the survey. If you didn't, you can just send me an email and we'll talk about it. Also, if you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A. One of the things I've learned from the surveys that I've from the presentations that I've done so far is that people come into this with a fairly good knowledge of what's going on. So when I do the cumulative stress, when I do the compassion fatigue, people may come in around a 3 out of a 5 or somewhere like that. In these, they usually come in about a 4 or above on out of 5. So you're coming in here probably with some knowledge of burnout. And I do want you to get something out of this. So please ask any questions, put those in the chat. I'll leave time for at the end of both sessions. So I'll leave some time for questions at the end of this one this morning and then at the one this afternoon as well. What we want to do today is have some learning objectives there. We want to define what burnout is. Oftentimes burnout's confused with compassion fatigue or something like that. So we want to define what we're looking at. We want to look at the job person mismatches. We want to be able to identify at least 2 of those that are the cause of burnout. 3 of the 9 organizational strategies to promote wellness and help prevent burnout. That's really what we're after today, is to sort of look at some things that we can do to perhaps better align the practices that we have to help prevent burnout. Once you're burnout, it takes a lot to get back from it. So, it takes a lot to build that resiliency coming back from burnout. So let's try to develop some practices here. And then we want to look at 2 ways we can use rewards and incentives just to align the values of our organization, strengthen the culture. Culture is a major aspect of this, and really just promote employee wellness. So what we want to do first, we want to look at the procedures that lead to change. And the reason I want to look at this, I mean, most everybody here is probably a very good problem solver. But the procedures that lead to change are a continuous improvement model. So no matter whether you're a fair problem solver or you're a very good problem solver, this is something that we can use to help us in that process. And I want to keep referring back to it. So as we go forward, I'll refer back to these procedures that lead to change. I want to define burnout, what that is, and then start looking at how we correct that. Now, this presentation is primarily, we sort of market it primarily for managers and things like that, because burnout has to do with systems policies, and managers are the ones who change those, change the system. That's their job, right? Is to manipulate the system. So want to look at those job person mismatches. I got 6 of those, and we'll examine each one of them and look at some corrections for them. And then we look at the 9 organizational strategies that we can use to help prevent burnout. Very similar to the 6 as you would expect. You would expect the organizational strategies to also be similar to those individual things, and they are. And we'll look at those on several different levels. And then we'll look at a few examples of that as we go forward. Okay. Before we jump right into the procedures that lead to change, I do just want to say that we're sort of proceeding from the viewpoint here that employees have intrinsic value in the organization, that they're essential assets to what we do. Now, I know that most of you, just based on the title of the presentation and the fact you're here, are probably in an organization where uh, that you already know that. I mean, you value your employees and what have you. I've worked for nonprofits over the years, and there were times, when we didn't get paid. Or we didn't get raises. We got paid pretty much we got paid all the time, but we didn't get raises in our pay. So that wasn't a motivation there. But one thing you could never say working for those places is that it was a thankless job, because they realized if I can't pay you, if I can't give you a raise, I've got to give you some reason to stay here. So they were always thanking us for the jobs that we did and what have you. So I think most of you know that already, but not everybody knows that. Just because you do, just because most of us do, doesn't mean everybody does. I've learned that over the years. So what we want to do is we just wanted to sort of begin from that standpoint as we go forward. This is something, not attending to employee wellness. And I'm going to use happiness as a synonym for wellness as we go through. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But, you know, I could look back and I could see the old timers that I worked with, or anytime I use that word happiness, you can see their eyes roll back in their heads, and they, oh my goodness, let's all go buy a Happy Meal, just buy everybody a Happy Meal, and then we'll, get in a circle and sing Kumbaya, which is a lot of time what you get. Well, this is something that costs billions of dollars a year if we don't attend to it. And especially if we're in organizations where we really don't have money to throw at the problem. Now, you don't want to throw money at the problem, but especially if we can't, right, then we need something else. So we want to look at that. And it would really be much more financially sound if we could just get rid of the naysayers or re-educate them, because we're going to re-educate them because they too are essential personnel. We value their contributions, but re-educate them than it would be to just ignore it, because once again, billions of dollars. In fact, let me just throw some numbers out at you here before we get started. A Cigna survey of 12,000 employees from across the globe, so not a small study. 94% experienced at least one symptom of burnout during the 12 months surrounding that. So 94% of those, large amount. Gallup did a State of the Global Workplace report. 43% of the workers from more than 100 countries had experienced burnout as well. So that's a lot of people who are experiencing workplace stress, who are experiencing burnout, and that costs money. Okay, so we know that the total estimated cost of work-related stress, of which burnout is a major part, was ranging from 221 million to 187 billion dollars in 2018. So that's 2018 dollars. So you can bump that up for 2024, right? So that costs a lot of money. We know that happiness, once again, wellness, happiness, I'm going to say happiness, increases employee productivity and creativity. HBR Analytic Services did a survey of 1,073 business leaders, and they made the following observations. Okay, so happiness delivered a competitive edge. Okay, this is what they found. 87% of survey respondents reported a happier workplace brings a competitive advantage. So definitely we want to try to stem burnout, and burnout has to do with where you work. Okay, so it has to do with those policies, those job person mismatches, organizational strategies that need to be changed if we want to have a happier workplace and a more productive and more creative workplace. Unhappiness takes a toll. 79% of those reported unhappy employees hurt productivity. 75% report it led to unwanted turnover. One of the biggest costs we have right in business is turnover, is the churn. That, by the time we have to offboard someone, onboard someone else, go through the whole selection process, get them set up with all of the benefits and what have you. That's a major expense, one of the major expenses that we have. And despite the clear benefits of happiness in the workplace, only 19% of the organizations that were surveyed made any kind of well-being a strategic priority in the workplace. But interestingly enough, there was how many of them? 95%. That's higher than I was remembering. 95% believe they can influence worker happiness, but only but only 19% of them actually did anything about it. So we have to say, why is that? Why are people? You recognize that if I promote happiness, if I promote employee wellness, then I'm going to have a more productive workplace. I'm going to have happier employees. They're going to be more creative in their jobs and what have you. So why don't I do that? And that's an interesting question. Oftentimes we think it's an EAP, right? Well, we have an EAP. If employees have problems, if they're not happy, they can go to an EAP. And EAPs are wonderful at dealing with what they deal with. Unfortunately, the three biggest things that they deal with are substance abuse problems, marital problems, and financial problems. Now, EAPs do a whole lot more than that. Okay. In fact, everything that we'll talk about today, probably EAPs deal with, but people don't go to them for that because they think if they go to an EAP and somebody finds out that they're there for one of those three things, right? So those are the things they generally get, and they're very good at dealing with those. But we just sort of develop that stigma attached to going to an EAP. It's also, it's sort of like the mental health stigma because people think that, well, that's what you're going for, which may not be true. Okay, maybe for stress management, maybe to learn problem solving, maybe learn any of the things that we're going to look at today, maybe sort of covered in an EAP. But people just, that stigma exists and people don't use it except for those three, but those are the three biggest things that an EAP is used for. So we can use the EAP and we can defer to it. And perhaps that's why, I didn't get to it in the research on exactly why 94% thought they could influence employee happiness, but only 19% did anything about it. But we know we can make strides here. That we know we can do better as we go forward with this. So the first thing I want to look at, I'm going to start there with, is the procedures that lead to change. Once again, these were introduced by William Glasser in his book, The Control Theory Manager. It came out in 1994. Since then, control theory has been changed to choice theory. And that was always considered to be what's called lead management within the organization at any rate. But he's the one who came up with these procedures that lead to change, the WDEP cycle there, where once again, this is a model of continuous improvement. Very similar to, if you're familiar with total quality management, the old plan, do, check, act cycle. Okay, so this is sort of the same thing where we have these aspects of it, and we have certain questions we ask with each one. So the first question we ask is, what do you want? Okay, so what do you want in the organization? What do you want in this particular situation that you find yourself in? The D is for the doing part. So what are you doing about it? Okay, I want my employees to be happier and more productive, but only 19% are doing anything about it, right? So what am I doing about this? If I want 100% involvement in this, then what am I doing to get that? The evaluation asks a couple of questions. One is what I'm doing getting me closer to what I want? Okay. So really measuring that, figuring out, is what I'm doing getting me closer to what I really want? And then the second question is it hurting me or others? Okay. And generally what that means in a business situation, in an organizational situation, is that has to do with long-term versus short-term goals, right? I may implement something that gives me a short-term result, but in the long term is not beneficial for the organization or its employees, right? So generally that's what we look at there, but that's the question. Is it hurting me? Is it hurting others as I implement this? And then the planning part. So what's my plan on this? So if we were to look at an example of this and say, what do I want? That's the first one that I want to look at. Well, I want to decrease the amount of turnover that I have, right? I want to decrease the churn. Once again, that's one of the major expenses that we have. I want to increase the retention within my department, within my unit, within my organization, whatever it happens to be. That's what I want as I go. And I'm starting with the wants, but you don't have to start with the wants. You can start anywhere on it. You can start with the doing, the evaluation, even with the planning. But wants is just sort of convenient. So we start that. What do you want in this? Well, I want to decrease the amount of turnover once again, increase the retention within my department. So what are you doing to get closer to what you want? Well, having pizza parties for employees. Everybody likes pizza parties, right? Pizza parties are good. Okay. I did a presentation not too long ago. Somebody said, we just had a pizza party. Okay, great. Okay. I'm doing the pizza parties. I'm sending out department-wide or unit-wide thank you emails. Thank you, everyone, for your what you're bringing to the business. Thank you for your effort as we go forward in this. I'm sending out those mass emails. Well, is that getting you closer to what you want? Well, it doesn't appear to be. Okay, it doesn't really appear those pizza parties, those mass emails are really making a difference in the churn, difference in the turnover. So is it hurting me or others having pizza parties? Well, it's not getting me closer to what I want. I don't know that it's hurting anybody, but it may be one of those sort of short-term things. The money I spent and money and time I spent on those sorts of things, just distracted me from doing something that was useful. So we can sort of look at it in that perspective. So what's my plan? It's not really getting me what I want. I don't see any change in what's going on. And once again, this is just an example. Put your own example in there and go through the process as we do this. But this plan, whatever it is, needs to be SAMIC, okay? SAMICC, where the S is for simple. And many of you may be familiar with the SMART planning. Military uses that a lot, other places, SMART. The terms are pretty close that we use them, and SMART planning uses them, but this is the one we use. Where the S is for simple. Now, most of the plans we come up with are going to be complex, but what this means is we want to be able to chop it up into simple parts. Okay, this needs to be chopped up into something simple, because the more complex it is, then the more likelihood that it's going to fail. Okay, if it's very simple, then okay, well, I can do the simple part, move on to the next simple part, and the next simple part to achieve the complex part, right? So the S is for simple. The A is for attainable. Is this a realistic goal? Okay. I don't want any turnover whatsoever. Well, that's probably not realistic, right? People leave for different reasons. Some people retire. Some people have other goals, whatever it happens to be. So is this a realistic goal? The M is for measurable. I have to be able to measure whatever it is I do. If I'm not measuring it, then I don't know whether I'm making any progress or not. I can be very susceptible to, the thinking errors and, emotional reasoning, right? I wake up in the morning, go into work, everything seems to be going well. So, hey, all right, we're making progress. And the next day, things are not going so well. And well, we're not making any progress. Well, I don't know whether I'm making progress or not. Unless I have a way to measure that. And we can measure just about anything. In fact, if you hire a consultant, as many of you may know, if you hire a consultant to come into your business and make some changes, the first thing they're going to do probably is start taking metrics, right? They're just going to start getting a baseline measurements to see what we can do. And if we do them, if they're going to make any improvement in what we're doing. Or if it goes the other way, right? What I'm doing is not getting me closer to what I want, it is hurting. So we need to measure that. It needs to be immediate. That means, can I implement some aspect of this today? Okay. If I can't implement some aspect of this today, then it's too complex. I need to chop it up into a simpler part, something I can do each day as I go forward. The first C is for consistent. Is this something I can do consistently? Serendipity is wonderful. If opportunity knocks, open the door and go in. But that's not a plan, right? That's not something that I can count on consistently. So I have to be able to do this in a consistent way, and it has to be something that I'm in control of. If I have no control over this, then it doesn't do me any good. That's the reason that most of the time we give this to managers, right? Because they make changes in the system. Supervisors don't make changes in the system. Employees don't make changes in the system. And burnout is a systemic problem. And we'll define burnout here in just a second. The other thing is you need to be committed to whatever that plan is. In management, you always talk about the management style of the month, right? So the managers go to a training or something, and you've got lots of different types of management, right? 3X, 3Y, 3Z management by walking around, control theory management, all this other stuff that you have. And all of them have probably research that says that they work. Okay. But the problem is that next month they go to another meeting and they have another one. Oh, well, that one sounds good. So they switch to that one and abandon this one. And then you end up maybe making sort of short-term gains that then fall off, but you don't make any in-depth changes in the organization. Now, if you stuck with just one, whatever it happens to be, okay, whatever one you go with it, stick with it, be committed to it. But I gotta be committed to that plan, whatever it is. If I just hop back and forth between them, then I'm not going to see any changes. I'm not going to see any lasting changes. I may see modest incremental changes, but those will go away pretty quick. And then I'm on to the next management thing, right? Okay, so that's what we do there. We'll look at those that SAMIC things. So before we get to the burnout, let's just look at an example. So we said, what would we do on this? Okay, so the pizza parties and the mass emailings telling everybody how well they're doing isn't really getting me where I want to go. So what can I do about that? Well, let me suggest something like this, okay, just as an alternative, is that instead of mass emailings, one of the things that I do is I send out individual emails based on specific performance. Because the mass emailing said everybody did a great job, thank you. Well, I worked myself to death on this, and Bob over here didn't do anything because I was watching him, right? We sit across the cubes from each other, whatever it happens to be, and he didn't do a whole lot. Okay, but he gets the same pizza and he gets the same email that I get. So it's non-motivational, right? But if I get an individual note from the manager, from the executive that says, Ron, thank you for doing XYZ during this project. We really appreciate that. That's going to mean a whole lot more. That's individual recognition. So that's going to do a whole lot more to motivate me. And maybe looking also at incremental responsibility. Now, some people don't want responsibility. Some people are just happy where they are, right? They don't want to advance. They don't have desires to do that. But many people do. I won't say most, but many people do desire advancement and whatever. They want to move up in the ranks, and that's what you give them. You give them recognition, and you give them that incremental responsibility as you go forward. Now, as a manager, you may not know all of the individual people, but your supervisors do, right? So that's who you get to give you the information on that. Well, what did they do in this, right? Give me 2 lines on how they contributed to this push that we're doing or whatever it is, and then you can send that, out. Or have your secretary send it out with your name, right? But it has your name on it and it's individualized. And then working with the supervisors, the unit leaders, whoever they happen to be, to come up with how do we increase this person's responsibility if they're open to that. Okay, so that would be how I would, the next step, right? The pizza parties, the mass emailings aren't working, but let's focus on something different. And why I gave that, we'll talk about in just a minute. But now let's get to burnout. So what are we talking about when we're talking about burnout? Well, it's a combination of physical and mental exhaustion, cynicism, and that perceived inefficacy that I have. It's really just it gives me some chronic, long-term job stress that I have to deal with. There's a wonderful acronym for that, and that is ICE, ICE. Inefficacy, cynicism, and exhaustion, those are the three things that characterize burnout. Okay. Now they happen the other way, right? I become physically and mentally exhausted, then I become cynical, then I think that, what I'm doing isn't making any difference in the world. So just know that they work from the bottom up on this, but ECI doesn't mean anything, right? ICE is much better. ICE I can remember, right? But ECI doesn't mean anything. But they happen the other way. But all three are characteristics of burnout when I have it. So Shanna felt noseworthy 2018. The opposite of those, right? The opposite of the inefficacy, the cynicism, and the exhaustion is vigor, dedication, and absorption in the job. This is what I want to promote. This is sort of motivation, right? This is what we would sort of look at. The person is vigorous in their job. They seem dedicated. They seem absorbed in the work that we have for them. That's what we would call motivation. So the opposite of that burnout is the motivation. Stressor, when we look at the stressors on this, did I skip something? No, I didn't skip anything. Characteristic of workplace stressors leading to burnout. Those come from being a mismatch between the individual and the job they're assigned to do, and they're chronic in nature. Okay, so this will lead us into those 6 job person mismatches and looking at those and what we can do about them. Now, there's something that you can ask yourself, and you can ask your employees as well. This is something that you can, whatever your report out period is. I know I've got to, after we get through this with this afternoon, I've got a report out to do as well to my boss. So some of the questions that you can ask that help to deal with the concept of burnout. And you can ask these at every meeting that you have, right? Question number 1 is, what have I learned this week? Okay, or whatever the review period is, once again. So that really sort of increases my absorption in my work when I'm, when somebody's going to ask, when I know somebody is going to ask me, what have you learned this week? Right? I become more absorbed. I pay more attention to what I'm actually learning. Okay. So that helps deal with the absorption part of that. The second question is, what do I want to learn next week? Okay, so that sort of helps with the vigor part of that. I sort of start looking at something that I want to learn, and then making an effort to actually move toward that goal. And then the third question is, how have I helped someone this week? Okay, so certainly that deals with building dedication and what have you. I know that I'm not ineffective in my job, that I am efficacious in what I'm doing because I recognize that I have helped someone this week. And this doesn't matter what the job is, right? Primarily today, we're talking about nonprofits, trying organization, or work, just generally organizations that work with older adults. But this works across that spectrum, right? Asking people, how have you helped someone? It would be rare that someone would not be able to answer that question. If they can't, then you're dealing with some incredible burnout there. But those are sorts of the things that we look at when we're talking about burnout. Burnout is a little different from something like compassion fatigue. We have a different training on compassion fatigue. Many of you may have been here for that. But the difference between those two is burnout has to do with where you work. Once again, that's the reason we sort of encourage managers to do this, is so they can make changes in the system. So burnout has to do with where you work. If I'm burnout in one place, I can go someplace else and work, and I may not be burnout. Okay, so if I once again, this goes back to that. I view the employees that I'm hiring as intrinsically valuable to the organization and what we're doing. Okay. If I don't, then I've found my problem, right? I found where I could start making changes. But I view these employees, so I don't want them to leave, right? I don't want them to get burnt out. I don't want them to leave because they're valuable. I hired them for a reason. Okay. They're working here for a reason, and I want to see them stay, because I have a lot of money and time invested in them, if nothing else, right? So I know that they're here and they're here to do a job, but if they're getting burnout, then I have to make changes in the system. I have to figure out what's going on and then make those changes in the system because they can go somewhere else and they won't be burnt out. Okay, they may leave my organization, go to the organization down the street, and they have a wonderful time. They're absorbed in their work. They're vigorous, right? They're dedicated at that place rather than for me. So that's what we want to look at. Compassion fatigue has to do with what you do for a living. Okay, so compassion fatigue. If I'm working in a business that deals with the aged or what have you, uh, if I get compassion fatigue, I'm either going to develop some resilience, and there are things we can do to build resilience, or I'm going to find another line of work. Because it doesn't matter if I go down the street to the other company who's doing the same job and I'm still doing the same job in the general field, it's not going to do me, it's not going to do any good. Okay. I'm still going to have that compassion fatigue. So burnout and compassion fatigue are two different things. Once again, compassion fatigue has to do with what I do for a living. I either develop resiliency or I find another line of work to be in. Because it's not going to change. While burnout has to do with where I work, the policies, these job person mismatches that we have up on the screen here. These are what are driving this burnout. And unless those change, I just need to go somewhere else. Right? I just need to find another place to work. And as an employer, I don't want that to happen. Okay. Once again, I have this person here for a reason. We have time in with each other. We have experience in. That's one of the biggest losses that we have is when I lose somebody that that's been here for a while, but they take a lot of knowledge with them. They take a lot of culture with them as well that I don't get back. So those are big losses. We don't want those to happen. We want to attend to these job person mismatches that we have here. So we're going to probably look at a couple of these, and then we'll save the rest of them, and then the 9 organizational strategies and some other place on flow state in the workplace for this afternoon. But that first one, workload. So workload issues present themselves as too many job demands and or too few resources to meet those job demands. Now, remember that these are chronic. Okay. Now, everybody has those times when, we have a big push for something. We're just overloaded with something. There's been a tragedy, whatever it happened to COVID-19. Let's just throw that out. That these things, and I have lots of people in here. I'm just overwhelmed with this. That's a short-term thing. That's sort of an acute problem. That's not a chronic problem. It's not long-term. So what we're talking here is long-term. The systems are in place and they're not changing, and that makes this a long-term problem. So that workload, too few resources to meet the demands. Once again, long hours might be a consideration in workload demands. So what do I do about those? So if I have those, if those systems are in place, how do I change the system for this? This is one of those. In fact, this is the only place where employees have some say in this. Okay. Now it's up to managers to change the system to allow these things to occur. But once I set that system up, the employees have to take advantage of this. And that's where I'm setting up time for recovery. Okay. Everybody has to have recovery time, may incorporate stress management and resiliency practices as we go forward. Remember that time spent on wellness is not time lost, but it's productivity gained, right? Once again, as I increase wellness, as I increase this happiness that I'm dealing with, then I see productivity increase. I see creativity increase. So I can set up these things, and some of the practices that I can promote, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the 9 organizational things as well. But some of the practices I can promote are those cognitive behavioral practices, such as guided visualization. If you were here for the presentation on cumulative stress and self-care, basically all of the things that we talked about there. As an employer, as a manager, I need to figure out how to adjust the system to allow employees to have these things. And once again, just to go through a list of them, guided visualization is one of those, progressive muscle relaxation. And these are things that I can go to YouTube and find. And some corporations, some organizations, I know that in during COVID-19, LMHA in El Paso, I know we got a lot of people here from El Paso today, but one of the things that the LMHA did was create a virtual wellness room. Okay, so they had lots of videos using guided visualization, using progressive muscle relaxation. People could log on, they could go there and access those videos. Had many other things on there as well. But that's something that we can do, right? HR needs something to do, right? HR, those of you in HR saying, no, we don't need anything to do. But that's one of the things that we can do in the organization, maybe create a virtual wellness room. And remember that it doesn't take a long time. I don't need to give employees an hour a day to do this, okay? Diaphragmatic breathing is another one of those evidence-based practices that we have. We know that 2 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing a day increases happiness, decreases stress. Okay. So 2 minutes a day, not a long time. And then something like EFT, the emotional freedom techniques, the tapping stuff that we've done here in our presentations. It's part of the evidence-based research. It only takes about 2 to 3 minutes to go through all 3 rounds of that as you're supposed to do. So 2 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing, 3 minutes of EFT, 5 minutes a day. You've got some significant stress management exercises, some stuff that can help deal with burnout. We need, once again, we need to create a space for people to do that. But, so you give people 15 minutes, you give people half an hour to work on this, what have you. And you're going to see positive benefit from that. So relaxation response is another one of those practices. Autogenic training takes a little more time, but you can certainly put that on a virtual, a digital wellness center if you have that. Excuse me, a digital wellness center where people can go on, on their lunch hour if they have a lunch hour, or 30 minutes if they get 30 minutes for lunch. On Wednesdays, I have a stress management group that I run for organizations with the state, and it's from 11 to 11:30, and people tune in, and we go through 30 minutes of wellness practice, and then everybody disperses back to whatever it is they're doing. So it doesn't take a whole lot to do that, to create that space. Mindfulness is another one. Mindfulness-based stress reduction. That's the one that the research is on. It's part of the evidence-based research. Any form of mindfulness is probably going to be useful. And once again, only 2 minutes a day is all it takes for that. Mindfulness-based stress reduction can take you 45 minutes, but that's not a magic number. That's just what John Kabat-Zinn was using in his own practice when he introduced it to the medical community. And so it just sort of stayed that. But we know that 2 minutes a day decreases stress. Now, the longer we do it, we may actually decrease more stress, right? But to see some amount of stress reduction, only 2 minutes. Transcendental meditation is another one. And once again, it's transcendental meditation. Most forms of meditation are probably useful. Most forms are probably useful. But transcendental meditation is a system. Everybody does it the same way. So that's what the research is on. So some of that. Biofeedback is another example of that. And once again, you can sort of create that digital wellness room, have links to all of these things on there, have videos. People can go in, they can see that, and then give them the space to do that. Create that space, then give them the time, to do that during their day, that they can take advantage of that. Like I said, this is one of the only things we can create the space, we can create the workspace, right? The digital wellness room and all of this other stuff, but the employee has to do it. This is the only one of these 6 mismatches where they've got to take that effort to actually do something on this. But we have to create it for them. So we can do that. So remember that balance is essential, right? There must be a give and take in the environment. So when we're talking about workload, we can't just constantly expect to take from employees. We have to give some of that back, right? Maybe that's that, half an hour a day or 15 minutes, whatever we want to allot to them for wellness practice. We can do that. And remember that if we're not talking about it and we're not creating that space for them, then they're going to ignore it, right? So we have to demonstrate that as well. Boundaries are another thing. We're in an age where, I work from home most of the time. And a lot of other people work from home. So when we first started doing a whole lot of that, once again, back to COVID, right? When nobody was going into work, everybody was working from home. Being able to set boundaries was a problem for a lot of people because you have to be able to set those boundaries. Otherwise, your workplace has now come into your home, right? I'm pretty good at dealing, um, 8 to 5 are my hours. I log in, I'm here and at 8 and then at 5, I'm out. Uh, but I do that, uh, number one, to set boundaries, but number two, because I work in disaster, right? I work for disaster behavioral health. So I know that at some point, we just had East Texas flood, all the East Texas storms and stuff like that. We've had several of those throughout the year already, right? North Texas tornadoes, everything, the fires that were going on. So I know there are times when I'm going to have to work after 5, right? I'm going to have to work on the weekends. I'm not going to do my 8 to 5 schedule. I'm not going to get that luxury. But during the times that I can, that's where I keep it. So keeping those boundaries, and making sure, providing structure so people do keep those boundaries is very important. I don't want to be intruding on people's home time if I can help it, right? If this is something that can wait until tomorrow morning, then let's wait until tomorrow morning, right? I don't need to send it to them that night, so they're having to look at it on their phone or look at it on their email, whatever it has to be, and then worry about it the whole night long. Every now and then I have I have dreams where I'm working, right? And then I wake up in the morning and I feel like I've already been at work, right? So not good. You want to sort of phase that out if you can, and create space, create those boundaries for people so that they can manage that workload. Once again, there are always going to be times. There are going to be those times we just have to sort of suck it up and we have to do what we're going to do to get the job done. But those should be exceptions. Those should not be the rule. This should not be a chronic problem. Okay. The next one is control. And when we talk about control issues, we're actually talking about a lack of control. And that means having control over the job, having control over the task that I'm supposed to perform. That is an important aspect of dealing with burnout. Okay. If you give me something to do and don't give me the authority to do that or the wherewithal to do that, then, I think I think you're wanting to get rid of me, right? I think you're just setting me up for failure. Well, we want you to do this, but we're not going to give you the authority. We're not going to give you the control to do what you need to do it. Well, why don't you just fire me? Because obviously that's what you're trying to do, right? That's the thinking that it can be done. I mean, oftentimes this is just something that, well, we didn't realize what was involved in the job, so we're going to have to adjust priorities. And once again, this is going to be more of a management issue, right? The manager is going to be able to have to assign these tasks and what have you. So, corrections to that control issue, once again, is increasing decision latitude in the workplace. We know that the more decision latitude I have, the more control I feel, and the less stress that I have in my life as well. Once again, remember, burnout is a major workplace stressor. So if I can decrease that stress, I'm doing well. So increasing decision latitude helps to reduce stress. Uh, this is the reason that the people at the top of the hierarchy have less stress than the people at the bottom of the hierarchy, is simply because they have more decision latitude. Let me say that again. The people at the bottom of the hierarchy have more stress than the people at the top of the hierarchy. We have lots of good longitudinal studies with tens of thousands of people on this over the years, not only with humans, but with other primates as well. So this is something that we know. Okay. Now I may not want the same stressors that my boss has. You know, my boss may have to deal with the legislature and things like that, and I don't want to do that. So I may be happy with the stress that I have, but I also know he has less than I do, simply because he has decision latitude in what he does during the day. So if I can look for a way, how do I, and this is the question I have to ask myself once again, is how do I increase decision latitude for employees in the workplace? This is one of those things. It sort of fulfills the basic psychological needs that we'll talk about later, and having that control, having that autonomy that may come with that. And we can get that. We can teach people to do that. That's a learning function. That's a teaching function. We can scaffold the job, right? When they get a new job, we pay very close attention to what they're doing, supervise them very closely as they prove they're able to handle it. And I start to pull that back. So we we never want to be micromanagers. I mean, perhaps that's my personal thing. Maybe not though. I don't think it's just personal. Okay, we don't want to micromanage. Okay, because that takes away my autonomy. That takes away any form of control that I have that goes with this. So if you want to do the job, then you do. Don't hire me to do it. Okay, you do it. Okay, I understand scaffolding, right? You want to get a good sense that I know what I'm doing, but that should be pulled back. That scaffolding should be taken down as we go forward. But don't, don't, if you're going to do it, you do it. You don't need me here to do it for you. So having that decision latitude, once again, very important. Scaffolding also deals with productivity and trust that's built during the time. The perceived control is also an important aspect from looking at it from developing flexibility and flexibility in the workplace that, the more autonomy you give me there, the more control you give me over what I'm doing, then I'm going to learn different aspects of this job, right? If you give me more responsibility, right, with that comes more control. I'm going to learn more about what I'm doing as I go forward. Now, once again, not everybody wants that control, but oftentimes they're going to have take it. They're going to have it. They're going to have to take it to do the job we need them to do. And if they don't want to do that, then once again, where can they be of most value knowing what they know? Once again, I don't want to just get rid of anybody just because they don't want to advance in the organization. There may be no place for them to advance, right? I may have a small organization. There's really nothing, they're not, I'm not going to create another position just for them, but I have to figure out how I'm going to employ them in the best way that I can. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do one more on this. Let's go ahead and do the rewards part of this as well, because rewards have to do with motivation. Okay. And there are two things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at a couple of different ways to increase motivation, a couple of different ideas about this motivation. We know that for better than half a century, right? In fact, probably well over half a century, that we reward the behavior that we want to see. If I want to see a particular behavior, then when I see it, I reward it. Okay. People are not much different from pets when we're training them, right? I mean, if you want your dog to jump through a hoop, right? If it walks close, you put the hoop on the ground, and if it walks close to it, you give it a kibble, right? And then you raise the hoop up and you give it a kibble. If it walks through it, you give it a kibble. Then you raise it up. If it jumps through it, you give it a kibble. It's progressive training. Okay. We do the same thing with people, right? When I reward what I don't want to see, invariably what I'm going to see is that behavior that I don't want. Okay. So I want to reward the behaviors that I want to see. I don't want to punish the behaviors I don't want to see. And I use that word punishment just in the general sense, if we have any researchers here. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to punish that behavior, because once we're gone, what's going to happen? Once we're not there, once we're out of sight, out of mind, then they're going to default to the other behavior. But if I reward the behavior that I want to see, then we know we're looking at results, and I'll maybe reward it at a different time. So one of the things that I want to look at, one of the motivational ideas here, and many of you have already heard of it, many of you know of it. It's Hertzberg's motivation and hygiene theory. Okay. Now, if you took Business 101, you hopefully heard of Hertzberg and his motivation and hygiene theory, and that was probably the last time you ever heard of it. Well, motivation and hygiene theory is a wonderful theory if you use it, if you're committed to getting it to work, right? Then it will work. But the ideas behind this are what I really want to look at. Hertzberg divided his theory into two parts: the motivational part and the hygiene part. And what he said is that motivators are what motivate, cause to move, right? That's what motivation means, cause to move, employee behavior. That's opposed to managers being motivated, employees not being motivated. Okay. In fact, Hertzberg talked about Kaita, and I'm sorry, uh, I'm moving ahead and not changing the slide. Sorry about that. There's a reference down at the bottom of there for Hertzberg's story. This is an HBR, Harvard Business Review, the best of Harvard Business Review articles. This is one of them, right? One more time, how do you motivate employees? Was Hertzberg's thing. But he said there were two things: motivators and hygiene factors. Motivators actually cause people to do something. And he talked about KITA, K-I-T-A, which means a kick in the rear. Okay. And he sort of used the analogy of a puppy, right? If you want a puppy to move and the puppy's not moving, you can kick it in the rear and the puppy will move. But who's motivated? Okay. You or the puppy? The puppy's not motivated. As soon as you leave, it's just going to continue to lay there, right? So you're motivated for it to move. You're having to do all the work here to kick it in the rear to get it to move. But as soon as you're gone, nothing's going to happen. Okay. The puppy's not motivated. He also said there was one from the front where you pulled it, right? It's sort of a kind of in reverse, right? That if you wanted to move, you could also get in front of it and you could pull it, right? But once again, when you left, what's going to happen? Well, the puppy's just going to lay there because it still has no motivation to move. So what motivated people, what he said, was recognition. Okay, now this dovetails with the Glasser stuff that we'll talk about in just a second, but recognition is the biggest motivator for employees. So once again, going back to our model that we first used, if I'm sending mass emails out telling everybody what a great job they did, how much value does that hold? How much recognition value is that really? Not a whole lot. Maybe some, right? At least I'm getting something, right? But it's not personalized, and once again, I saw Bob over here didn't do a whole lot on this project, right? We all have those people. We have group projects, right? They don't do a whole lot. That was Bob, right? But he got the same pizza and he got the same email, right? So recognition, specific recognition for the employee, individual recognition, that's what motivates employees. Okay. Now, hygiene factors, what he was calling hygiene factors, were things like pay, vacation, health benefits, all of those things that are now have become entitlements. Okay. Those entitlements that we have, those are hygiene factors. They do not motivate anybody. Money is not a motivator. Interestingly enough, they just came out with a study not too long ago. I was reading it on LinkedIn that it looked at 40. I think it was 43% of managers said that pay was a motivator. Okay, that pay motivated employees. If you looked closer at their data on that, what you found out was pay was a motivator in that 43% because their organization had prioritized pay as a recognition factor. Okay. The only way people were recognized in the organization was if you got a pay raise. Okay. Like I said, those of you who've worked in not-for-profits, nonprofits know that there may be years we don't get pay raises, right? In fact, it may be 2 or 3 years we don't get pay raises. So we can't motivate employees that way. And even if we could, it wouldn't work because no matter how much you pay me, I'm always going to think I'm worth more, right? At the end of my review period, 6 months or a year, or whatever it happens to be, I expect more money, right? Benefits as well. I won't even look at a job unless it has certain benefits, right? I need health insurance. I need this stuff. So all of those things are considered entitlements. They do not motivate employees, but they act as, if I don't have them, it will demotivate employees. Motivation factors motivate employees to do what we want them to do. Hygiene factors don't motivate employees, but if I don't have those things, it will demotivate them. Okay, so they don't motivate anybody to move forward, but if I don't have them, then they're going to drop down, right? So that's the difference between motivation and hygiene factors that Hertzberg was talking about. That those motivation factors, the biggest one being recognition and responsibility. And that's what responsibility. If I give you responsibility, then I'm providing recognition, right? That you've done a good job. We expect that you can do this. So we're going to give you more responsibility. That goes in with the recognition part of that. So that's what motivates employees. I worked for someone one time who said, I was the assistant clinical director for him, and the owner said, I think I'm going to give everybody a raise. And I was like, well, why are you going to give them a raise? Well, it may help motivate them. And I was like, no, that's not going to motivate anybody. No need to, let's not throw money at that, right? Being a creative guy, he came up with other ways to do that. But it was like, no, that's a waste of money. We're not going to motivate anybody if we do that. Like I said, he came up with some other ways to address that problem. But once again, motivation is different from hygiene factors. Hygiene factors are never going to motivate anybody. Okay, I'm not going to motivate you by giving you more money unless I have created an environment where that's how you think you get recognition. That's the caveat to this. Okay, if I create an environment, if I create an organization where the only kind of recognition you get is if you get a pay raise, I've not done myself any favors. In fact, I'm just going to have to keep paying money. And what happens when you reach the limit, right? What happens when you top out on your pay grade? Okay. Once again, not everybody wants to, say, well, I got to take a new job. I got to be a supervisor or whatever. Not everybody wants to do that. They're very happy with what they're doing, where they are, and they're very good at what they're doing. And I've liked having them there because they are very good at what they're doing. They have a lot of skill at that. They have a lot of knowledge in that. I don't want to lose them. That's the Peter principle, right? You advance to the level of your own incompetence, right? So they're happy where they are. They're very good at where they are. I don't want to push them up to their level of incompetence, right? And I'm going to repeat that Peter principle. I want to keep them where they are if that's where they want to stay. But at some point, I'm going to run out of money. Okay. I can't give them any more money they've just reached their pay limit. Okay. At those for the organization. So I better have other ways to motivate employees, and that's with recognition. Once again, responsibility. I can still give responsibility, a little more responsibility within that position that they may have. But that's what I want to do. Okay. Once again, if I build an organization that the only recognition I'm getting is money, short term, that's going to work. This is one of those things. Is it working for you? Well, yes, it's working for me. Everybody's doing more. Okay. In the short term. Long term, it's not going to work for me. I guarantee you. Okay. And we can probably point to some examples of that. The other one that we want to look at here is William Glasser. Okay. And that's the choice theory. Used to be control theory. It's where we got the control theory manager. You can probably still find that on Amazon. But choice theory, the idea of lead management, he developed. Choice theory itself, Glasser, you may know from, he developed reality therapy. Glasser was the developer of reality therapy in the 50s. It's been around for a long time. And then he developed choice theory to explain how reality therapy works, why that works. And this is basically because of basic human needs. Glasser said we all have these genetic needs. Okay. We have the need for survival. That's the physiological need: food, water, heat, air. Okay. But then everybody has 4 psychological needs. Okay. And one of those psychological needs is recognition. Okay. So it fits very well with Hertzberg. Okay. I am motivated by recognition, control, responsibility. All of those are synonymous terms. Okay. And the needs themselves, any synonymous term, we're talking about the same need. They're not term specific, they're need specific. So recognition, control, responsibility, reward, all of those are talking about the same thing. It's the same need. We also have the need for belonging, okay, for acceptance, to feel cared for, to care for others. That's one of the basic needs. Freedom, independence, autonomy is a separate need from these others. Now all of these others are they're very interrelated, but they're also very distinct. Okay. I can't fulfill one need through the other need. Okay. So if I have a high need for responsibility, uh, you might say, well, that's sort of the same need for autonomy. And when I no, those are 2 different. I may have a high need for responsibility, but at the same time have a low need for autonomy. So I do need a closer scaffolding as we move forward. Oftentimes how that demonstrates itself is I need somebody to tell me I'm doing a good job. Okay. If you just let me go, it's great. If you just let me go, I love that autonomy. I love that freedom. I just go and do what I'm supposed to do. But if I don't have recognition for that, right? If I don't hear that, okay, you're doing a good job from my boss or my boss, right? Uh, although it wouldn't hurt on the surveys either, but I'm just saying, but from my boss, right? Saying, okay, good job, you're doing a good job, we're pleased with what you're doing. If they don't say that every now and then I start to worry, right? I start to think, well, maybe I'm not doing a good job. Maybe they just don't want to tell me that I'm not doing a good job. So you can have one and not the other, right? So those are different ones. That freedom, autonomy, and choice different from the recognition, responsibility need. And then we have a need for fun, for learning, for creativity. Now we all have these needs, but we have them at different levels. Okay. So I may have a very high need for freedom. My wife says I have a very high need for power. I don't see that so much, but I have a very high need for freedom. Somebody else may have a very low need for freedom, right? It just depends. And the thing about the needs is they will change depending on the moment. Okay. Uh, let me restate that. The needs are genetic. They're set. Okay. So if I have a high need, it's a high need. It's never going to be a low need, but it may feel like it's low. I know I don't want to go through the 45-minute on how this choice theory on how this works, but it may feel low in the moment because I'm not getting it met. If I'm not getting it met, then I am motivated to do something to get it met. That's where the motivational part comes in. I can have a very high need overall, but in the moment it feels very low because I'm getting it met at the moment. So I have no motivation to really do anything to get it met because whatever it is I'm doing is meeting the need. But we have these needs, and these are important to know because if I can figure out what my employees' needs are and then make interventions to meet those, then I'm going to motivate employees. I'm going to reward them by meeting those basic needs. Now, people stay at the workplace because those needs are met. Okay. That, I stay with you and not go with somebody else because these needs are met here. And so I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to stay here because you meet my needs. If we meet employees' needs, then we get our picture as a needs fulfiller, as a needs meter, in their what's called their quality world. Okay. And once a picture gets in the quality world, it almost never goes out of it. Okay. So you might say, well, this is sort of manipulative. Well, I mean, we do this throughout our entire life. We do this with everything, right? What I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out what are my employees' needs, what motivates Bob, right? Bob's motivated by creativity, right? The reason he didn't do anything on this last job may be because that he didn't feel like he had any creativity. We were just, the rest of us were just going at it, sort of set, this is what we do, this is what we do. There was no, when he made a suggestion of it, we told him to mind his own business, whatever it happens to be, right? But his need for creativity was not being met. So he was not motivated to do anything. Okay. Now you say, well, as a manager, how do I figure out all these? Well, that's why you have supervisors, right? That's what the supervisor does. They're the one-on-one. They can observe people. They can make a, a little needs profile. You got 4 psychological needs, right? Everybody has a just bar graph. Okay. 4 with each one of those, love and belonging, power and recognition, fun and learning, freedom and independence, and a scale of 1 to 5. 1 because we all have them in some measure, 5 being the highest. And so we just mark that out. This is what Bob's need profile is. Okay. So when it comes time to reward Bob, then I need to look at what is his biggest one is creativity. Okay, what do we have coming up that we need somebody who's creative on? This project right here, great. Let's put Bob on this, okay? Because Bob likes that creativity. Let's let him run with it and see what he can come up with. That's going to motivate him. Okay. Like I said, if you want more on this, you can read the Control Theory Manager. Also, Bob Wobelding has a book on this. He's big into Bob Wobelding, reality therapy, choice theory. Just Google that. And he has a one on employee motivation and how to use choice theory for that. So those are the 2 needs. When we're looking at rewards, once again, remember, we don't want to try to motivate people with hygiene factors because we're not going to do it. We're just throwing money at something. And it's not really going to work for us. It may help from demotivating people, but it's not going to motivate people. And we want motivated employees. We want that absorption in there. We want that dedication. We want that motivation to reduce burnout. Okay. So, all right. So let's stop right there. And we'll come back this afternoon and we'll do the remaining 3 of these and then get into the 9 organizational things that we can do. Do we have any questions?
There's 3 of them in the Q&A.
Okay. So what are some other ways to boost morale when you can't give substantial raises? Well, that's it, right? I just gave that to you. Figure out what those, but do a basic needs profile for them. You don't have to worry so much about the survival. If you're paying them a living wage, right? You don't have to worry about the survival one, but the 4 psychological needs, do that needs profile on your employees and then figure out what it is that motivates them. I mean, you may even talk to them, right? Depending on where you are, your supervisors are going to talk to them, right? In the reviews or whatever they do. That can be a part of the discussion that you have, figuring out those needs profiles. And there are some questions you can ask. There's some games you can play on figuring out needs profiles. I mean, you can't just ask, what is your need? What are your 4 basic, these are your 4 basic needs. Which one is the higher? Because they're not going to know, right? You're going to have to ask some questions that help figure that out. But one of those things that you do is figure out those needs profiles. And that's what you do. Those are the motivators. Stay away from the hygiene factors. That's a waste of time. If you create that culture where recognition is based on pay, and many places do, apparently 43% of them, according to this survey, then that's a bad place. That's going to be a bad place to be in the long term. Okay. Some of the areas I see, such as job mismatch for me, are things not sure the system can change, like location is unsafe or feels unsafe. Okay. All right. Clients are difficult, and quickly curse people and yell. Is this burnout or compassion fatigue? As far as the location goes, I would say it had to deal with burnout, but dealing with the people, that's going to be compassion fatigue. Dealing with the clients, that's going to be the compassion fatigue part. So I can develop some resiliency skills around that for longevity within a field like that. This often comes up with something like hospice nurses as well. Hospice having to deal with the family, not so much with the clients, but dealing with the families and things like that can be a very difficult job with people yelling and screaming, no, the person was put on hospice and now, the family doesn't want that. And it's a whole big thing. That's the compassion fatigue part of that. The location, that would be actually one where we looked at basic needs. That would be the survival need. Okay. Because if I'm fearing for my life when I'm going to work, if I'm afraid I'm going to get mugged or whatever when I'm going into the job, that definitely falls under survival. So that's, how can we deal with that? I can't change locations perhaps, but maybe I can get a security guard or something like that. I mean, I know that's an extra position, but um, it doesn't have to be a full-time security guard, maybe just a part-time security, depending on what your hours are and everything, but to provide some sense of security, because that is the survival need. That would be one where we looked at that fifth need, that survival need. So how do I make it more safe? Maybe security of some sort, right? I got two big college guys who are big bruisers or something who need some extra money, right? I get them to stand outside and watch people walk in and out from the garage or whatever it happens to be, right? But yeah, that one would definitely, that would be an important one, because that is that security need. That's that survival need that we're talking about. Yeah.
Very good. Doctor, thank you. Everyone, now, please note that once we close out of here, you look for another Zoom email with a link for this afternoon session. And I guess if you're done, we're ready to end the morning session and move to this afternoon.
Okay, well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Once again, please come with questions. Like I said, I know most of you are familiar with burnout already, so I do want you to get some benefit of this. I may not know the answer to it, maybe maybe I know somebody who does know the answer. May I refer you to some information or what have you. But I hope to see you back for the afternoon session, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Doctor. Kathleen, I'm sorry that you're having to endure that being in such a horrible place to have to tune into us. One of these days I need to get a trip to Maui to run the webinar from there, just to and it's not a problem that you missed it. Just so you know, I'll get going. I'm going to introduce myself again. I'm Marty Mascari. I am a contractor under the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the North Central Texas Aging and Disability Resource Center, or ADRC, both of which are under the umbrella of the North Central Texas Council of Governments in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. We are blessed again to have one of our star presenters, Dr. Ron Mottern, to talk to us about avoiding burnout in organizations that serve older people. And I have to throw that in just because that's our target audience that we have to do for our funding. So I'm gonna say a couple of things. Please, again, if you have a Q&A, a question, please put those in the Q&A, and any comments in the chat. It just gets very time consuming at the end to try to have to filter through all the chat to find the question. So if you do that, that's great. I appreciate the two of you that are already put questions in there. And I'm going to go over the CEUs again at the end, but just so you know, we're only offering full day CEUs. We're not offering partial CEUs for half day. So I just want to make that clear for the people that are joining us for the first time this afternoon. Dr. Mottern, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Welcome back for round two. Just a brief summary of what we covered this morning. If you're like me, if you took a small nap at lunch or something like that, you might have forgotten what we went over. That's a problem that I have. So just briefly, what we looked at this morning, we started out looking at that WDEP cycle, that wants doing evaluation planning, because we want to really use that to evaluate what's going on in our organization and if what we're doing is working. And we've referred back to that a few times. We looked at that SAMIC, action planning, SAMICC, that we do, that accompanies that. And that's on the slides up to here. Then we looked at a couple of the things. We looked at burnout. We defined burnout as sort of that ICE acronym, that those feelings of inefficacy we get, the cynicism, and then the physical and mental exhaustion, realizing that it usually works the other way. We become physically, mentally exhausted, get cynical, and then we think that we're ineffective in what we're doing. One of the ways that we can combat that and really sort of build vigor, dedication, and absorption, which is the opposite of those things, is to ask ourselves those three questions, right? Number one, what did I learn this week? Okay, so in my job, what did I learn this week? Spreading that throughout the organization, asking that to your employees. What did you learn this week? Number two, what do you want to learn next week, right? So get them focused on that, get them focused on being absorbed in their work. And then number three, how did you help someone this week? So we are focused on organizations with older people today and what have you. So how did you help someone? Very unlikely that you've gone through a week without helping someone, even if it's not a client, even if it's just a coworker or what have you. You may have helped them as well. So I'm not feeling ineffective in what I'm doing, not feeling like I'm not making any difference. That's one of the things we can do to help sort of combat burnout. Then we started looking at those job person mismatches. So we have 6 job person mismatches that really drive burnout. We looked at 3 of those. A couple of the corrections that we said we could use. One of those things was recovery, right? When people are, the workload is too much, I don't have enough resources to do what I need to do, I'm working long hours, things like this. How do I deal with that? We said that's by creating a recovery space, promoting wellness activities. These are all the wellness activities that perhaps we can create an organizational digital workspace, a digital wellness room that have videos and things that people can go there and they can utilize those videos, practice those sorts of things. To help us. One of the questions on there was, will this video be there, and are there others? Yes, Marty has he has the one on cumulative stress and self-care, the most recent one. I think there's actually 2, one from earlier last year and then one more recently, but that's up on there on the cumulative stress and self-care. There's another one up on there on compassion, fatigue, and resiliency. Once again, there's 2 of those. I like to think I get better as I go along. So maybe I'll have this one up sometime in the future if you want to refer back to it. But really just creating a space for employees. This, like we said, this is sort of the only one that, I mean, as managers, we create the space, but it's up to the employees whether or not they use it. So, but promoting that, we'll talk more about how we can promote that and what have you. But it doesn't take very long for these things. We talked about 2 minutes, right? These practices that take 2 minutes a day. So giving employees 15 minutes a day, maybe half an hour a day, something like that, where they can engage in those wellness activities and really promoting that can help prevent burnout. One of the other things that we talked about was what our slide is on right now, and that was rewards and using those rewards in a logical manner. What we don't want to do is we don't want to focus on hygiene factors. Hygiene factors are money, pay, benefits, all those things that we consider entitlements these days. Those are hygiene factors. Those motivate nobody. They may prevent demotivation, but they're not going to motivate me to do anything. But what does motivate us are those basic human needs, and both Hertzberg and Glasser sort of met minds on the recognition part of that, recognition, responsibility, And we said well, there was one survival need when we talk about those choice theory needs, basic human needs. We have the need for survival. And there was a good question last time about the safety of where the job is, right? That really deals with that survival need. Most all the time we're dealing with the four psychological needs, right? But that was one that actually did have to do with survival. So those psychological needs, we have that need for belonging, love, acceptance. That's all. Those are all synonymous terms as far as choice theory is concerned, and many others, not just those, but anything that's synonymous with those. Recognition, once again, responsibility, control. We talked about those. Same need. Freedom, autonomy, choice, independence. How we could use these to motivate employees, because these are indeed motivators. Learning, fun, creativity is the other psychological need. So we talked about those. And I mentioned Bob Wobelding's book. It's Robert Wobelding, and it's called Employee Motivation: What to Do When What You Say Isn't Working. I believe that's the name of it. What to do, employee motivation, what to do when what you say isn't working. And in that, he talks about WDEP as well. In fact, Bob was really, when we started using WDEP, he's based in Cincinnati. And for those of you who are old enough to remember, he used to promote this as WDEP in Cincinnati, sort of a play on the old WKRP in Cincinnati, if you're old enough to remember that. I haven't heard him use that in the last decade or so, maybe a little longer. But for those of us who remember that, that's sort of how he promoted that. But also, as I looked at the book during the break, and I really wasn't thinking that, but I looked at the book during the break, and in that he does go over what we call in choice theory the 7 habits. And this ties into the other question that we had, where on competitive burnout, you share a frustration, and then you get back from your coworker how they have it worse, right? So a little one-upmanship on, I really had a bad day. This is going on. Oh, well, you should have had mine, right? I've got to deal with this in my department, sort of thing. That one-upmanship on the bad side. What we want to do is we really want to promote these 7 habits. There are 7 caring habits, and there are what we call 7 deadly habits. Now, Glasser obviously took from sort of the 7 deadly sins, right? And he called them the 7 deadly habits. But we have 7 caring habits. Now, the deadly habits, and these are things we do not want to do, because you'll remember from this morning when I talked about we wanted to get our picture in what we call our employees' quality worlds. Okay. And we do that by meeting their needs, meeting those 4 psychological needs. That's how we get our picture in there. And once we get our picture in their quality world, then they're going to be motivated to work with us and work for us. So the deadly habits, and I sort of use an ABC on that. It's just easier to remember that way. The deadly habits that we do not want to see, and anytime we use it, it is hurting our relationships with whomever it is, our employees or our spouse or whoever, partners. Number 1 is angering. Okay. Angering, blaming, complaining, criticizing, demeaning, enabling, threatening. Those are the 7 deadly habits. Now, there are more than that. Okay. There are many deadly habits out there, just like there are many more positive ones. But those are the main 7 that we look at. So we want to promote a workplace where we do not see those. Okay. And this could be something as simple as, with individual clients when I'm doing reality therapy. And this is the same thing. The quality management and reality therapy come from the same base of choice theory. As I will often, when they're having problems in the home and what have you, I'd say, just take this, stick it on your refrigerator, right? And say, I'm not going to do this. These are what I'm going to do. And refer back to that. If you catch yourself starting to use one of those deadly habits, just shut it down. It doesn't take a whole lot to print those on poster board and hang them around the office, sort of doing it like the same way you do at the house. So, and promote that we don't want to hear this. We don't want to see this in the office. Okay. If you have a complaint, that's fine. Okay. There's a difference between having a complaint and complaining, right? And you know what the difference is, right? I don't think I have to go into detail on that. We know that people just complain all the time, but if they have an actual complaint, then we want to hear that. But also the caring habits, the things we really want to focus on, that we really want to promote, that's things like supporting, encouraging, listening, accepting, trusting, respecting, and negotiating differences. So once again, there are more than that. There are more positive behaviors than that. But those are the behaviors that we want to see. Those are the behaviors we want to promote in the workplace. So once again, it sort of starts from the top and it filters its way down to the employees, but really pushing, we don't want to focus on these things. We want to focus on these things. And so I think that's how you can sort of prevent that negative one-upmanship that goes on. Now, is it going to occur? Well, it may, but this is a way to sort of combat that. Say, these are the things we want to focus on, these positive behaviors, these caring habits. We want to focus on those in the workplace, and we want to try to root out and get rid of these deadly habits. Because if we're focusing on the caring habits, then once again, that's putting the workplace in the employee's quality world, and that's what we want to. That's really what we want to do, because that's then motivational. Now, also, as I was talking earlier today, I had mentioned happiness and employee wellness, happiness, same sort of thing as far as I'm concerned. And we talked about those basic human needs. As far as choice theory psychology is concerned, what happiness is, happiness tells us when our needs are being met. So I definitely want happiness in the workplace. I definitely want employees who are happy at the workplace, because that tells me that when they're there, I'm meeting their needs. The opposite of that, if they're not getting their needs met, they're going to be miserable. Okay. And that's who we see in therapy, right? If we're doing individual therapy or group therapy, whatever it happens to be, we see people who are miserable, people who are not getting their needs met. And so we help them figure out how to do that from a reality therapy perspective. But in the workplace, I want to promote happiness. Once again, happiness being related to the fulfillment of the 5 basic needs. And if I'm miserable in the workplace, if you got a lot of that negative one-upmanship going on, what that is telling me is that employees are not having their needs met in the workplace. So I have to figure out, well, how can I do that? There's books on this. Like I said, Glasser has a lot of books on it. Bob Wolding, his book on employee motivation is out there. In your area, someplace, there's probably somebody doing reality therapy. You can check out the William Glasser Institute online. And the best thing to do would be to go to a basic intensive week, and that'll help explain that. One of the things that we talked about earlier is, oftentimes I don't have the money to throw at my employees, right? And I don't want to anyway. But if I know my employees are motivated by something else, for example, being a therapist, I've worked places where those sort of not-for-profit places or whatever, they don't give you any money for raises. You're not going to get any money for that, but they will give you money for training. So most of the people in my line of work are sort of motivated by learning and what have you. So if they would let us go train, that's great. And it doesn't have to be everybody, right? If I have 10 people on staff who I want to get trained, and I may not have the money for that, I can always send maybe 2 people that I do have the money for, and have them come back and do a sort of train the trainer sort of thing, right? Have them come back and train other people on this. So you can do it that way. But I encourage you to do that. You could probably find somebody who will come in for your specific organization and say, do a 3-hour training, right? Do a 3-hour training focused on this, or maybe an 8-hour training, do a 1-day training and focusing on these aspects, and how specifically for your job, these are the questions, right? You're going to start out with what do you want, right? What are you looking for in the organization? What are you trying to take care of here? But you can find somebody to do that. So that's one of the ways that we can utilize rewards in a proper manner, and not just throw money at something which is a hygiene factor anyway and not a motivator. Okay, so that's for that, and I think I answered those two questions. And if I didn't, then just leave them up there. I'll get to them later as we go through. The next one of those six factors, those six job person mismatches that we have, is the community. Okay, and when we talk about community in the workplace, what we're really talking about is fit. Okay, and when I say fit, I mean, do you fit within the organization that you're working for? I know in academia, if you're looking for a job as a teacher or something like that, fit is the most important thing for the department. Okay, everybody who's come in is going to have they're going to all have a PhD. You're going to all have a PhD for the same thing, the same job you're applying for. So credentials aren't generally a job, and in places, caring institutions, things like that, you'll often have people all have the same credentials, right? They're licensed clinical social workers or professional counselors or whatever it happens to be. So that's not really important because you're not going to look at anybody who doesn't already have that credential. But what is important is fit, right? Do you fit with our organization? And part of the thing that goes with fit is the problems we have in the community are people problems, right? They're employee relationships that we have people who aren't getting along and what have you, or our culture, once again, our company culture, our organizational culture is not a fit for what do you think it is, what you want to do. I've done presentations before and have people say, well, the way things are done, it's really just not right. So, okay, well, why are you still here, right? If you don't think they're doing what's right, the question presents itself. Why are you still here if you think what's going on isn't right? I need the money or whatever. I've only got, this is when you hear it in government, right? Is I've only got 2 years, 3 months, 4 days, and 12 hours left to retirement, right? So I'm not going to leave. I mean, that's the choice you make, right? WDEP, once again, what do you want? Well, I want things to get better. Well, what are you doing about it? Is complaining doing something about it, or is having a complaint that you can take to management and say, this is what's wrong. This is what I see is what's wrong. And maybe a solution would be this. Now, I don't have to have a solution to have a complaint, right? But it certainly helps. So I may not know what the answer is, but I can at least point that out and say, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is, we've got a mission statement, we've got a vision statement, right? I don't think this fits with the mission statement or the vision statement, whichever it would happen to be, and talk about that. Okay. But the way I correct these things, especially in employee relationships, okay. Now, as far as culture goes, I want that psychological safety that's there. I want to create a culture with psychological safety, especially if I'm working with teams. And you'll read anybody who's on LinkedIn, right? Get those articles on there. I guess it depends on who you subscribe to, but all those articles on creating psychological safety with teams and what have you. But the employee relationships are the big part of this because change comes about through a relationship. That may be an individual relationship. It may be a relationship between me and the organization or at any level of that. So that's what I have to look at. And many times, many times, this employee relationships problem within the community culture has to do with a lack of social skills on the part of employees. Okay. Uh, Hopefully not on the part of managers. But on the part of employees. I mean, I've worked places in the past where people just did not have these social skills. And once again, go to HR. Okay, those of us who have these social skills, I flatter myself. Those of us who have these social skills tend to think that everybody has them, that they got them the same way we did. We just picked them up. We saw people who had modeled them. We say, hey, that's a good behavior. I want to learn that. Maybe unconsciously or consciously. But so we pick those up over time. Not everybody does that. Okay. And once again, ask HR, they will assure you that not everybody knows these skills that we have listed here. Okay. Because these are many of the problems that come up And how can I deal with these things from a managerial point of view is I may have to teach them. Things like active listening is a basic social skill, but very rarely will we see that used. Okay. So active listening, knowing your feelings, that's a little more complex social skill. The arousal control, that's fairly easy, but knowing when to use it can be difficult. Assertiveness, these sorts of things, all of these are skills. These are especially important for people as they make their way up the ladder. If I have somebody who shows ambition in the company, they want to advance, what they're doing looks pretty good. We want to give them the chance to advance and see what else they can do. You better make sure that they have these skills. Okay. The first time I ever saw these skills, those of you who've heard me before have heard me tell the story. The first time I ever saw these skills in action was I was in Austin, having lunch, eating a bowl of noodles, and the three guys walked in, two of them with gray suits on. So I knew they were from IBM across the street. IBM used to have a big plant there, uh, used to have a big office there. And they sat down, and the two of them proceeded to just jump on this other guy. I mean, they were giving him what for. And I mean, it was upsetting to me. I didn't know who they were, didn't know what was going on, but that somebody would treat someone else like that in public was just, oh my goodness, this is horrible. Well, come to find out they were from IBM, and IBM had a management training program. They still do have a manager training program where they teach these skills. I think most of it is online these days. I don't know that they actually take people out in public and give them sort of trial by fire in a public venue anymore. In fact, I would doubt that occurred, but that's how they used to do it. And that's exactly what they were doing with this guy. Is he was in the training program, so they were making sure he knew how to use these social skills. And as I recall, he did an excellent job at the active listening part. I mean, he would look at him as they were berating him. He would nod his head, ask a question every now and then for clarification and what have you. So he really knew how to use those skills. But these skills are very important, and not everybody has them, once again. And if I don't have these skills, that's going to create tension in the workplace. And that's going to mean that, it's not a good fit. I mean, old Bob may be one of the best guys I have working for me, but he has no social skills whatsoever. He has the social skills of a rock, right? So what do I do? Do I get rid of Bob because he's not a good fit? Do I keep everybody else, on a heading toward burnout because they have to deal with Bob? Or do I do something like have a training, send Bob to the training, where he can learn some of these social skills and plan to use them and what have you. So once again, we have these social skills, the arousal control. And what I'm talking about there is, I become emotionally aroused. Okay. So I get angry. How do I deal with anger? Dealing with anger is a social skill. I become anxious in a certain situation. So, that shuts a lot of people down. So how do I deal with that? That's what we're talking about, the arousal control and arousal of emotions. I get angry. I get anxious. I get upset about something. How do I control that sort of thing? And once again, not everybody knows that. We may know it, but not everybody does. And that creates problems in that community that we have at work and within that corporate culture. So what do we do with this? Once again, how do we correct these sorts of problems? Sometimes we just have to train employees. And once again, if I want to know how to do that, maybe I send one or two employees out to learn the skill and come back and do a training session with everybody else, right? We used to do that all the time, especially if you don't have money for raises and things like that. This is one of the ways you can do it. You have somebody there who is, teaching somebody else how to do something fulfills a lot of needs. Okay. And so we can do that. So that's how you correct that misfit in the company culture, is by, number one, providing psychological safety. If I'm not safe, nothing's going to change. Okay. So it's one of the things you have to have either within a corporation, within an organization, or within an individual relationship in therapy, right? You have to have that sense of safety because I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change anything. In fact, I'm going to revert back to probably some, very obstinate habits that I think have helped me in the past, which may or may not, but they certainly didn't help me change. So I have to have that feeling of safety before I can make a mistake. That's fine. But let's now do some education and social skill um, learning and figure out these things that we can help you not make that mistake again. Okay. The next one is fairness. And once again, when we're talking about fairness, we're really talking about a lack of fairness, right? And we can all see that in the workplace. We've all seen that perhaps sometimes. There's sort of a lack of fairness. Some people are treated differently than other people based on not on job performance, okay, but just
Can you all hear me? If someone could put in the chat, if you could hear me. Yes, okay. And so I just was trying to figure out if it was Dr. Mottern we lost or if it was my internet. I lost everybody. Thank you for answering that. But let's give them a minute to get back with us. uh, let me see if it will allow me to. There you go. He'll sorry about that, y'all. Just one of those things. Yeah. Unfortunately, I know everybody has different internet capabilities or resources or whatever. And I can see when I look at the attendance in these that there's people that I've had people that have been kicked out numerous times log back in, but it's not something that I can correct on my end because it's only happening to two or three people. It's got to be something on with their internet um, or something on their end that's causing them to get kicked off because the majority of people didn't are still off. So let's see. I'm sure he's coming back. He may have decided to take a break. We'll put you on hold for just a minute and see what we come up with. Yes, it'd be a good time to get up and go to the bathroom or whatever you need to do. Look at that. And there he is. Can you hear me, doctor? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm back.
You're
Sorry
you're
about that. I
back.
got kicked off for some
You,
reason.
you just froze up on
We
our end.
adapted, we overcame, we're back.
You froze up on our end,
Where did I
and
end at?
I came on to have to ask people, can you hear me? Because I don't know if it was my internet that froze you up. That froze me, so I couldn't hear you or yours. But yes. So if you want to, let me get you back to share your. I guess I have to re-give you permission. I'm sorry. I think.
Yes.
Um, there you go. You should have the permission.
Okay. Sorry about that. I have no idea what happened there. I noticed everything went blank there, and then it was like, wait a minute. I don't think I'm on anymore. Uh,
Welcome
okay.
back.
Okay. So hopefully this is this is sort of where we left off there. We were talking about fairness, and then we went to values. So values is the last of those six when we talk about those job person mismatches. So when we address values, we're really talking about the moral values that we have in life in the trenches. Okay, because sometimes things look good, things are we can espouse sort of lofty goals and lofty values. Those don't always work out in the trenches. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions and whatever. And we have to realize that when we ask people to set aside their basic values in order to do a job, then that's where we're really setting up burnout, right? And it doesn't take much to do this. Now, remember, all of these things are chronic, but this is one of those things which, if it happens once, it doesn't have to be a chronic thing. If it happens once, that can be enough to lose the employee, and we don't want to do that. So the employee's values have to align with the values of the organization. And how do we make sure that that happens? One of the ways is to provide people with meaningful work. Now, from an executive level, of course, all work is meaningful, right? I don't pay people to do make work things, right? So everything that I'm asking to do, I consider it to be meaningful, but they may not have that same understanding of it. They may not have the understanding of why this is meaningful. What am I doing this for? Okay, and understanding can be important. Now, we can say, well, you don't need to understand; you just need to do it. Okay. All right. Well, that'll work in the short term, but it will not work in the long term, right? So that's one of those things that if chronically I'm asking you to do things that you don't understand why you're doing them, you don't see the value in them, then that's gonna burn people out eventually. So if it doesn't seem like the job I'm doing is making sense, if it doesn't seem like it has value, that's going to burn me out. Because I mean, everybody wants to do a good job and everybody wants to think it's meaningful work. Remember, inefficacy is one of the characteristics of burnout. If I don't think what I'm doing is effective in my job, then certainly that's going to burn me out. The other one is trust and integrity. Okay, so both of those should be modeled by everyone within the organization. Sometimes, once again, these are things we have to teach. What does trust look like? What does integrity look like? Okay, we can model those for people and let them know that this is what we expect to see from them. Once again, for whatever reason, some people don't get this growing up, right? Either because they didn't have anybody to role model it for them, or at the time it was modeled for them, they just didn't care. Okay, so for whatever reason, we may have to have talks on trust. We may have to have talks on integrity, and I encourage people to view this as a learning opportunity. Once again, going back to that basic premise that I'm not hiring people that I don't want there. Okay, if I'm hiring you, I want you there because I've seen something in you that I value, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to continue with the churn, continue with the turnover rate, and all this other stuff. Because number one, it costs me money to do that. But number two, you're a valuable asset that I want to promote to go along, that I want to polish you so that you're of more value to me. So trust, integrity, those may be things that I have to teach, but the best teacher for those is modeling those. If I see my first line supervisors, my unit people not acting in with integrity, not acting in a trustworthy manner, there's nothing that turns off a good employee like seeing a bad employee tolerated. Like, so, you know, at some level, I may have to have the conversation with somebody about what's going on here and really find out if they know what it is. If they know what it is and they're just not doing it, in which case it'll be a different discussion than I don't know what you're talking about. Right? That's sort of ignorance, and we can teach and we can deal with that. But trust and integrity, giving people meaningful work, make sure they understand that everything that they do has a purpose, and really making them understand that, they're there because you want them there. Okay. If you didn't want them there, they'd fire you. At least Texas is a right to work state, right? If I don't like you, I'm going to fire you and find somebody I do like. Okay. So the reason you're here is because you have value to us as an organization, and I want to continue promoting that. I want to continue to, once again, just polish you. Somebody may be a gem in the rough, right? And all they need is some help to polish them. At least that's the way we want to look at it. Okay. All right. So those are the 6 job person mismatches. Now, as far as organizational strategy goes, when we look at these organizational strategies that we have, you will notice they're very similar to the individual job person mismatches. Okay. And then we'll look at how they can break down even further. But number 1, the strategy is to acknowledge and assess the problem. So going back to that SAMIC, right? SAMICC, the M for measurement, right? I have a problem here. What do I want in this? That WDEP cycle. Okay. What do I want here? If I've got something that I don't want, or I don't have what I want, then that's a problem, right? So what is the problem here? What do I want? What do I not want? And I need to be able to measure that as well. So once again, if I don't measure it, then I don't know if I'm making any improvement. I don't know if I'm making any progress. So I want to do that. Number 2, harness the power of leadership. Okay. I mentioned this before. This is very powerful. It's monkey see, monkey do, right? If I see you at the top doing something that you're telling me not to do, that's certainly not integrity, which we just talked about, right? But I'm probably not going to do it either. Okay. So harnessing the power of leadership to demonstrate the virtues that we talked about, to demonstrate the caring habits, okay, and eschewing the deadly habits as we go forward. I can't tell you to do these things and then not do it. As an example of this, I used to work for an organization where the head of the organization was accused of sexual harassment by his secretary. And he was sort of the top. Above him was the commissioner's court. Okay. Above him were the judges. So eventually she went to the judges and accused him of sexual harassment. And so he was called in and called on the carpet for that. And so the result of that is that the entire department had to have sexual harassment training. Okay. Now that didn't seem very fair. It didn't seem very equitable because most of the time we have to have that training anyway, right? So this was sort of a redo of it. We had to set aside time from our days and our schedules to go to this training. And guess who taught it? He did. Okay. So once again, integrity, right? You just got called on the carpet for this, and yet you're going to tell me what I should be doing. So not a good example of harnessing the power of leadership. Okay. So in a leadership position, that executive position, that management position, really modeling that integrity, modeling that equality, all of those things that we've talked about that we want to see organizationally, we want to do those things. And from an organizational perspective, I had to ask myself, how do we influence this within the organization? I'm not talking about any of this. I'm not talking about doing a major organizational overhaul, right? I mean, that in itself is going to be, cost lots of money. Not nobody is going to do that, right? I'm going to have to be really bad off before I undertake some vast organizational change here. So I have to ask myself, how do I influence this from where we are, right? How can we influence this? Just like with the deadly habits and the caring habits, right? Maybe it's just putting out posters. Maybe it's, putting it on an email or something like that people get. But getting it out there. So when I say harness the power of leadership, That's how do I influence people? Once again, they're in control of what they do or what they don't do. So anything I do anyway is simply influence, but really asking, how do I influence? How do I set that up in the corporation to where I'm in showing that influence, right? Okay. Develop and implement targeted interventions. Okay. This is what we talked back. Remember, we said, what do we want this morning? I want to decrease the churn. I want to decrease turnover. I want to increase retention. And I said, so what I'm doing now is I'm sending out targeted personal congratulations, personal thanks in this project. And this is what I know that you're doing. So that's what we want to do for this. I just got a message said my internet connection was unstable. So if I get kicked off, hang on, I'll be back on. Just stick where you are. Sorry about this. Don't know what's going on. No weather here right now, so I'm not sure what's up. Anyway, so develop and implement those targeted strategies, right? Those targeted interventions. Throwing money at the problem is not going to solve. It's not a motivator. I don't want to do that. I want to do something like have a profile of individual needs, strengths, and what have you. Bob, I know that Bob's motivated by creativity, we said, not so motivated by belonging. He really doesn't care whether he's in a group or not, or what the group thought of him. But maybe he's more into the creativity. That's what motivates him. So knowing that about these people, once again, as an executive, as a manager, I'm not going to know everybody. That's what my supervisors are for. They can give me notes, right? I want the notes. I want to know what motivates these people under your direct control. Send that up to me, then I'll know, and I'll know how to respond to it from then. And that training in and of itself, how do I do this? Well, I may have to send people to training, like I said, training on the choice theory, looking at choice theory needs and stuff like that. Probably somebody in your community who teaches that. Cultivate community at work. Once again, we talked about this in the individual mismatches. This is the fit part, right? I want to cultivate community. And how do I do that? Well, I cultivate that community by creating a harmonious community. One of those things we said was the 7 deadly habits and the 7 caring habits. But I also may just have to do a training every now and then on basic social skills, right? If somebody's not showing those, may have to do a training on those to show that those are developed. And once again, whoever's teaching that class better be using them, right? Otherwise, we're not showing much integrity in that. So don't reserve it only for managers, right? Don't reserve it only for supervisors. But the problem is really the culture. This is the in the trenches stuff, right? If in the trenches it's warfare down there, then it's not doing me any good. So I have to create sort of that harmonious environment in the trenches, and then model it on the way up. Use rewards and incentives wisely. We talked about this. Remember the difference between Hertzberg's motivation and hygiene factors. Motivation factors, motivation means to move, right? Those get people to move in the direction that I want them to move. Because of intrinsic motivation, they want to do that. Okay, hygiene factors just prevent them from being demotivated is all that does, which is good. I mean, we need that. We have to focus on those. We have to be aware of those, but it's not going to. I also have to know that it's not going to motivate anybody. And then those Glasser's, those 5 basic needs, especially those 4 psychological needs, on how do I meet those as I move forward. Number 6 is to align values and strengthen the culture. We talked about that. We talked about whatever culture it is I want to see. Number 1, I need to be modeling that from the top down. But how tight is the organizational fit? That's really what I'm looking at. Maintaining those moral values, creating a culture of integrity. That's essential to avoiding burnout. Okay, so I have to do that. Promote flexibility and work-life integration. Once again, workload, fairness, all these things should be considered when deciding on ways to avoid burnout. What can I do within the power that I have? The state, if you work for the state, you're not going to get a bonus. Okay, no matter how good a job you do, you're not going to get a bonus because that's not in the pay structure. Okay, but what the state is very good at doing, what they can do is they can give you leave. Okay, so if you do a good job on something, your team does a good job, you may get administrative leave, right? We're going to give everybody an extra 4 hours of leave, an extra day of leave, whatever it happens to be, to thank you for what we've done. Now, leave is not something that's an entitlement. Okay, leave is something that goes a lot with creating. We originally, when we started talking about creating distance between work and home and things like that, and creating a space for wellness. So this can be tied into that. We're going to give you the extra 4 hours. We hope you'll use it for the wellness aspects, to visit some of that. So the flexibility, but the work-life integration, that work-life balance is, and there's many tools you can get for that, to have people fill those things out. People always ask, what do we do in, you schedule that time for people's interviews, right? And they've got an hour, you schedule them an hour. Usually they come in and we go over, okay, you got a 5 on this one. What did you put on that one? Well, you got this on that one, and things like that. And that's a very ineffective use of time. We could spend time in those sorts of things, talking about the integration, how to integrate work-life balance if people are having a problem with that, and we can see that, and really asking people, going over those needs profiles, and saying, we know you have a high need for this. How does that fit in? What are your goals with the organization? How can we help you meet your goals? We always want to train people and promote people to the point where that they could leave us and go work for anybody else. But if we do that, they're probably not. Okay. Or if they do, they'll probably come back. Okay. Because very few people do that. So that's what we want to do. We want to promote that flexibility, that work-life integration. Remember, flexibility also reduces stress, so it reduces burnout. Number 8, provide resources to promote resiliency and self-care. We said one example of that was create just a digital and online wellness room that people can go to and see Marty's videos of me doing cumulative stress and self-care and compassion, fatigue, and resiliency, or many others that are out there on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, punch those things in. You may have links to the autogenic training, links to the stress reaction response, those sorts of things, mindfulness videos, diaphragmatic breathing videos. There are all sorts of things out there. There's even something called, this just comes to me as I was looking at this, there's even something called the cardiac ocular reflex. When we do this, it can reduce the heart rate by 20%. Okay. And all it is taking your fingers and pressing on the eyes. You don't want to press too hard, right? Don't press them through the back of your head, but just putting pressure on the eyes like that and holding that for 1 minute, that can reduce the heart rate up to 20%. That connects to the vagus nerve as well, and that's what we're stimulating there. But just things like that, just simple things. 1 minute is all that takes. Help to reduce heart rate by 20%. That's something that, should go on your digital website, right? Demonstrations of that and what have you. That these things, once again, they don't take time, but we want to encourage people to use it. If we just create that room and put it out there, there's not going to be many people using it. It's going to be my guess. Okay. So we need to model that from the top. I've known organizations where these things are modeled from the top. The managers, the heads of the executives, these are people who are promoting this all the time. Okay. They promote this wellness because they know, they know in their own lives that they're taking care of their wellness. for many executives, they will not miss their weightlifting, their jogging, their meditation, whatever it is they're doing, their yoga class, whatever it is. They schedule time to make sure that that is in there, because they know that if they don't have that there, then they will not do as effective a job as they could otherwise do. So how do I promote myself? How do I maintain my own fitness for the job that I do? How do I increase that fitness for the job that I'm doing? I've got to have this aspect of it in there. So modeling that sort of thing, promoting that, once again, from the top down. So, but providing that space for employees and promoting that resiliency and self-care. And then number 9 is to facilitate and fund the organizational science. So once again, learning is a basic need, many aspects of that need, but learning is certainly one of them. Many of you may be around, have been around long enough to remember Peter Senge and his book that came out in 2006, I believe it was, called The Learning Organization. It was called The Fifth Discipline, the art and practice of the learning organization. And that's really what this is talking about. How do I cause my organization to grow? And it talks about many of the things that we've talked about today, as far as the promoting resilience, self-care, these sorts of things, understanding. During the compassion fatigue training, I talk a lot about the cognitive aspects of this. So cognitive restructuring, things like that, looking at belief systems, which are points of view, all these sorts of things that go on are included in the Fifth Discipline and the Fifth Discipline workbook, which is a big workbook full of practices and things you can do. If you're going to take that route, remember, you need to be committed to it. Okay. But it fits in with what we've talked about so far. So those are the 9 things. And we want to look at each of those 9 things, okay? Each of those 9 factors, we want to look at on these levels, okay? So we want to look at it on an individual level. We want to look at it on a work unit level. We want to look at it on the organization itself level. And we want to look at some national factors that may affect us from there. So once again, looking at each of those factors and going back with the 9 with those 9 things. So from the individual factor perspective, want to look at personal values. What are the personal values of the individual employee? Talked about that a little bit. What are their professional values? Once again, these are things we can talk about in those review sessions, right? That not, I can't tell you how many reviews I've had over my long life, but very rarely did we talk about these sorts of things, right? Most was like, what'd you get for number 1? A 5 or a 4? Okay, well, we gave you this. And it just went sort of that way. It was sort of a waste. You came away as this is sort of a waste of time, right? You know, because I got what I got, you got what you got. It's going to be what it is, So what did we really do here? So those individual factors, when you have the review period that you have with your employees, whether or not they get a raise, right? Because once again, human services don't always get a raise. But talking about, so what are the professional values that you have? Looking at some questions on what are personal values, ethics and morals. This is good stuff that you want to know about the individual, especially as you're developing that needs profile. And so you can train these people so you can bring them along. What's your commitment to the organization? Oftentimes there's that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? I see myself in your job, whatever it may be, right? But what's the commitment to the organization? So how are you going to gauge that? How do you gauge commitment to the organization? And how do you communicate that to employees, right? That's important, that you're committed to the organization. Once again, if you use those basic human needs, if you use that choice theory, then the commitment to the organization is going to increase as you meet those needs. Okay. As you promote those 7 caring habits, that's going to meet the needs. Their dedication to the company, to the organization is going to increase. Okay. And once again, just simply because of the topic is for organizations working with older individuals, oftentimes, oftentimes that is not for profit, nonprofit organizations and things like that. If you're for profit, that's great. If you have money to give raises, that's good too. Okay. Once again, caveat: I encourage you not to use pay as a recognition tool, or you're gonna long term you're gonna end up with a problem there. But certainly, it can be a part of that, but we don't want it to be a big part of that. Work unit factors. Once again, we're moving up within the organization from the individual to the work unit. We want to consider strategies from that perspective, from the supervisor, the work unit leader. We want them to demonstrate integrity as we move up that chain. Are they being morally and ethically sound in their judgment and the way they're treating employees and what have you? And we'll look at their behaviors as well, right? Because remember, it's from the work unit. Leader is the first example of what is rewarded, what is tolerated, and what have you. If I see it tolerated in the supervisor, then I know that I can get away with it, or at least I think I can. Okay. So whatever whatever we bind on earth is, and at the supervisor level, is bound throughout the organization as we go through that. This incorporates the work unit norms and expectations. When we talk about fit, how do people act within the organization? What is tolerated? What is not tolerated? Once again, from that perspective, how do people go about achieving goals? What's the optimal method of communication to achieve these desired goals? So once again, getting back in sort of the social skills, how do I go about these things? And what am I expecting of my supervisors, of those first tier leaders that I'm supposed to have? The next level is the organizational factors. Now we're looking at the organization as a whole. How do we use rewards and incentives at the organizational level? Okay. The organizational mission is key to that. Do you have a mission statement? Do you have a vision statement? Well, most everybody does, but do your employees know what that is? I used to work for an organization where the mission statement was very brief and everybody knew what it is. It was on the back of the ID badges. We got, they give shirts and t-shirts and things like that, which are always nice. Don't motivate anybody, but it prevents demotivation. But it would have that on the t-shirts and what have you. And just about everybody knew what that was. So we all knew to enrich the lives of our clients, right? To enrich the lives of those we serve, right? So we knew that was the vision of that. That was the mission that we wanted, the mission statement, to enrich the lives of the people that we served. And it was very brief. Like I said, everybody knew that. And you could always go back to that, and you could always look at that and say, okay, so what we're doing in the organization right now, is this really enriching? Are we doing this to enrich the lives of the people we serve, or are we just doing it to make money? Okay. Because oftentimes that's what it comes down to. And that's where you deal with the ethics and the morals, right? This is, are we doing this because it's the best for our clients, or are we doing this just because we think we can make more money off of this? And that's where we talk about top-down leadership, right? That there's nothing wrong with making money for the organization. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, if there's a difference between those two, yes, we'll make more money, but it's not going to serve our clients any better. I don't know. Maybe it's not something we want to promote there. Service quality versus other considerations, once again, usually fall into that. The organizational values, once again, what are we rewarding? Okay. Once again, we've known this in psychology for decades upon decades. Okay. We reward the behavior we want to see. Okay. And those rewards, when we talk about rewards, we're talking about motivators. Okay. There's motivators from Hertzberg, motivators from Glasser, but those are the things that we want to reward, whatever it is I want to see. If somebody's cutting people's throats and trying to progress up the top, and we reward that, guess what we're going to see more of within the organization? Okay. And most of the human service organizations, that may work on Wall Street, but most of the human service organizations that I know of don't want that sort of behavior in their institution. Okay. I don't want that in my organization. So be careful what you allow. Be careful of what you reward, because you're going to see more of that. The behavior of the senior leaders, once again, from an organizational factor level, what are you modeling? From the top down, once again. So what are you modeling? And then communication and messaging. So what are you saying and how are you saying it? If I want to promote these things, how am I getting that message out? Okay. How am I getting it out? How am I disseminating it to the employees that these are the things that we want to see, and these are the things we don't want to see? And then, of course, I have to be consistent with that, with the rewards and punishments. Organizational norms and expectations, once again, sort of the same thing. Culture, I want to be very aware of the culture that I'm creating. Okay. Do I want to create a culture of growth, a culture of creativity? Or do I want to create something where everybody's afraid to do anything? Okay. Now, when we go to the national factors on this, I just did a presentation recently on this, and I asked the question. I said, what would be a national factor on something like this in your organization? And it was for corrections. I was doing it for corrections, and they said suicide, correctional officer suicide. So that would be something we look at on a national level. What are the trends in this? What can we learn from the trends for this? How can we incorporate what we know about this into our own organization? Another one that was mentioned was at a different one was minimum wage. Right, that's a national thing. Now, hopefully, we're paying more than minimum wage to most people, but it's something that I have to be aware of. What is the minimum wage? Is this something do we want to just promote the minimum wage in our organization? We know that pay doesn't motivate people, but we do have survival needs, right? I have to be able to live on what I'm making. Maybe not, may have to have another job, but I want to, try to keep them here and focused on my job as much as I can. So those are something we look at. Secular values versus religious values, those may be things, depending on where we're operating, that take a front seat and things we need to look at and what have you. So those are the organizational factors. And once again, I see that I have not followed along. So here we go. We're catching up here. Structured reimbursement was another one. Once again, especially with physicians, this becomes an issue for how we pay them and how we reward them, etc. Not that pay motivates them, but once again, okay. So what are some concrete actions? Well, once again, managers demonstrating wellness engagement to their employees. Emphasize that time spent on wellness is not productivity lost, it's rather productivity gained. That's the reason that your major executives always put their time in there to do what they need to do. You see past presidents perhaps jogged, some of them played golf, some of them did other things, but they would schedule that time in there because they needed that time to renew them. And so we want that renewal. Speak in the language of the culture you want to create. If I want a healthy culture, then I want to use the language of those 7 caring habits and those other habits. There are more than those 7, like I said, but I want to use that sort of language when I talk about something. I do not want to use the deadly habits, the deadly language. I don't want to use that because I'm going to create that culture that I'm in. One more thing quickly that I did want to cover. That's not in here, but there is a survey. There's the survey. Once again, if you get a chance, if you enjoyed the presentation, please go and fill that out. It always worries me when I say that. When I say if you enjoyed the presentation, please go and fill it out. Then nobody fills it out. It's like, well, I don't know how I did on that. But anyway, there's that if you want to get to that. But one more thing I did want to cover quickly is, before we get to any questions, is how to create flow state in the workplace. Now, we know that flow state is something that combats burnout. And when we talk about flow, if we just look at a graph, right, we take that horizontal, that x-axis there, and say that's a skill level in whatever my job is. And then the y-axis, that vertical one, is a challenge level in my job. Well, if I have a high level of challenge and a low level of skill, that's going to create anxiety. Okay, so if I have, once again, talking about those job person mismatches, looking at that, if I have a high level of challenge and a low level of skill, that creates anxiety. If I have a high level of skill and a low level of challenge, then that's going to create boredom. Okay, so I'm going to be bored, I'm going to be anxious. But when I can match this sort of that 45-degree angle, when I have both a high level of challenge in the job and a high level of skill, that's when I can achieve flow state. Flow state is an optimum state of human experience. So when we're talking about happiness, right, and need fulfillment really is what we're talking about when we talk about happiness, that flow state is the peak state. We can't get any higher than flow when we're doing that. And you can have flows determined by 9 characteristics. I'll just go through these briefly. Challenge, skill, balance that we just talked about, and action and awareness merging in this. Very clear goals. So, as managers, making sure everybody has very clear goals. Unambiguous feedback, okay, that's given in the moment. I need to give people feedback on what they're doing, and I need to do it in a timely manner. Can't wait to do it once a year, right? That doesn't do me any good. I have to do it at the time. So that unambiguous feedback in the moment, concentration on the task at hand. I need to be able to concentrate on what I'm doing. A sense of control. I have to have that. If somebody else is in control, I'm not going to get any feeling of flow, right? Because they're in control. A loss of self-consciousness. Okay. So I become totally absorbed. So when we talk about that absorption being the opposite of burnout, I'm going to become absorbed in my task, whatever it is. Time transformation, it seems like I've only been working on this a few minutes and I've been working on it for hours, right? Hopefully it's not the other way. Hopefully I'm not working on it a few minutes. It seems like I'm working on it for hours, right? But that time distortion, and then the autotelic experience. Autotelic experience is just a state where I'm just intrinsically motivated to do so. I do it just because, right? I don't, why are you doing that? Well, I don't know. It makes me feel good to do it. I don't know. So looking at that. So those are the characteristics of flow. We can create that in the workplace. And when we do, there's been studies on this, when we create that flow in the workplace using those 9 characteristics, excuse me, then what we see is an increase in productivity on orders of magnitude. Okay, so productivity really goes through the roof when we can increase that flow state in the workplace. And if we look at those job person mismatches, if we look at those 9 organizational strategies, we can incorporate the conditions for flow state within those and really see productivity increase. There's a flow state questionnaire that you can look up. And you spend that review time to give people the flow state questionnaire, okay? And the questions it asks have to do with those 9 characteristics. So you know where to adjust those if you want to try to create flow. So that was just a brief look at flow there. So do we have any questions? Are there any? I didn't see anything in the question and answer.
Doctor, I haven't looked at them. It's showing 3 in the Q&A, but there is a couple in the chat. Please put your questions in the Q&A so we don't have to filter through the chat to find them. And so as doctors doing that, could we put up the slide and we go over the CEUs real quick? Will you look at the questions?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, got ahead of myself there.
Well, you know what? I can do it here because I think it wasn't the right slide anyway. I forgot about that. Let me see if I can just open it up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Sorry about that. That's the one that I've got.
Yes, that's all right. That's all right. You guys, for those of you that are looking for CEUs today, first of all, the link that Dr. Mottern just gave you please, please take that survey for him. That helps him, and we appreciate him incredibly as a speaker, and it helps us hopefully retain him as a speaker for future topics and future webinars. But he needs that information, so please do that. For those of you that are looking for CEUs, we are offering CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in Texas. The certificates of attendance are also available for those who need one. If you have a license in Texas or another license outside of Texas, you're more than welcome to submit those, go through the process, get a certificate, and submit it to your jurisdiction. I know it says 1.5 hours today, but today's webinar is worth 3 hours of CEU credits. But you've had to have attended both the morning, all of the morning and all of the afternoon session to qualify for those CEUs. You also must complete the Google survey. That should pop up after as you close out of Zoom for this one. There was not one in the morning. There's just one this afternoon to please fill that out based on the whole day, both parts of this. The survey link will be up for a week from tomorrow. Actually, that's great. A week from tomorrow. Please know that the link for this survey and for Dr. Mottern's survey, and I'm going to also include the links to the two webinars, the recordings of the 2 webinars that we did, that Dr. Mottern did for us, that he referred to today, just in case you haven't seen those. I'll include the links to those also. Give me about 4 weeks from, give me 5 weeks from today to get those certificates out to you. And then feel free to reach out to me after that if you haven't gotten it. And we can figure out if there's a problem or not. We just have lots of them we're doing and always trying to catch up. So, okay, Dr. Mottern, I'm turning over to you for Q&A. Go ahead and you can shut this down now. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, let me just stop there before I click it back and forth again.
There you go. No problem.
Sorry about that.
No.
I'm moving this and I'm on the wrong thing. Okay.
Not a problem at all.
There was a question in here. Let's see. Now I've lost it. There was a question. The question had to do with, I work for an administrator who is, not fair in the way that they dole out things, not fair in the way they treat people, and what can I do about that and what have you. This is one of the reasons that makes this difficult for employees, right? It's one of the reasons that we look at this. Hopefully that administrator was here and got to hear us talk about that. If you're working under someone like that, however, I mentioned Hertzberg's article on there. Came from Harvard Business Review. They came out with a little booklet of their best or most requested articles. So Hertzberg was in there. One more time, how do you motivate employees? Carl Rogers, who is the creator of person-centered therapy, he had an article in there on communication, what real communication looks like and how to do that. But there was also an article in that text called How to Manage Your Boss. And that's really sort of what you're going to have to do, right? Is how do I manage them? Taking what I know about them and the way they interact, maybe I need to do a needs profile on them and get my picture into their quality world, right? By meeting some of their needs in certain ways. How do, maybe they're susceptible to praise and flattery, something like that. Recognition would be what we called that. But how do I manage my boss? That's about the only way you deal with that to prevent burnout, right? Is to get on the good side of that. And I would refer you to that article. We have some other questions. One said some companies give you a probationary period. Can you also give the company the same to determine if it's a company for you prior to burnout? Most certainly, I think that most people actually do that or should do that. Let me say it that way. I know that the last job I left, I told myself, I'm never going to work for anybody who doesn't know who I am or what I can bring to that position again. Okay. So, and if they want me, then they better know about me. They better know what I can bring to that company. They better treat me as a person of value. Okay. Now, I understand we can't always do it. Sometimes I just need to pay the bills, right? But at the same time, I need to consider myself being a person of value. What skills do I bring to this organization? And I should be treated like that. And yes, I can give them a probationary period. 2 or 3 years seems like a long time. If after about a year you're not the fit isn't good, you're not having your needs met, I wouldn't expect them to be met in 2 or 3 years. Okay. So, but that's up to you, how much you can deal with that. But sure, that's how I look at it these days. Anybody I go to work for is on probation with me. Fortunately, the people I work for now, I love it. Was with them on a different grant that I worked on. I'm with them on this grant. So I love my job this time, and I know that they appreciate what I do for them. How does one work in an agency where the administrator favors some? Okay, here, this is the question. Favors some employees over others. Workload is applied unequally. Get my picture into their quality world. Okay. Learn how to manage your boss. I refer you to that article from Harvard Business Review. Follow the link to the Hertzberg article on the slides, and that should as you follow that back, that should give you all of those articles, and that was one of them. But that's sort of what I have to do. Though sometimes you make an accommodation for an employee for private health or mental health matter that others may not know and you cannot share. Okay, I don't know that was a question. Sure, that's an individual thing. HIPAA rules probably apply in some cases. I'm not going to make that well known, nor do I want to. But it may be a situation. Once again, those three things that EAPs do really well, right? Are deal with mental health issues and things of that nature. So it may be a referral to an EAP, which is entirely confidential. People don't think it is, but it's entirely confidential. People don't leave bad jobs as much as they leave bad bosses. That is entirely true. Change occurs within the context of a relationship, and in an organization, my most immediate relationship outside of my coworkers is my boss. So if I'm not having a good relationship there, that's one of those times I probably want to look at meeting my needs someplace else. Some things might not seem fair for a reason. There might be a reason for that, but there's not a reason that I can't ask about that, right? I can say this doesn't seem fair to me. This is going on. Explain what that is, and get the explanation for that. As much as I may not get an exact explanation, maybe above my pay grade, right? But I can certainly ask for an explanation so I can wrap my mind around what's going on, right? Okay, pay is definitely a factor in burnout. Once again, if I've got to meet those survival needs, right? Or if I've been in the same company for 15 years, I make less than average, barely over the new hire pay. That's the problem with focusing on pay. And that's the problem with making pay a form of recognition. This has nothing to do with you, it has to do with the company, right? The problem is I have somebody who's been there for 15 years, but the people who are starting out are making as much or more than they are, right? Because the pay has gone up over the years. And as long as I base my recognition, I base my rewards on a pay scale, that's going to always be a problem. And I know it's a problem that the corporations struggle with as well. But I hear what you say, and I've been there myself, where I've worked in some place for a very long time, and the people who are starting are making as much or more than I am. Just, you know, and I say, wait a minute, this isn't fair, right? They say, well, you know, there's a pay structure, and this is the structure that we're going by. And at that point, I may have to decide to leave one place and go to another place where I can do the same thing that everybody else is doing to me, where I can start out as at a higher rate. And but that's when people say, but I've been here for 15 years and I'm looking at retirement, and I don't want to leave. Well, that's the choices I have to make sometimes. Okay. All right. I think we've already looked at that one. Okay. That's all that I see.
Okay. That's right. I wasn't following as well as I should have when you were answering them, but so I'm just dismissing the rest of them to be sure. Well, that's why I said suggestion hires. I think that's a common. Well, very good. Outstanding. Doctor, as always, thank you so very much. I mean, just great information, you know, look at the chat, and you can see the appreciation. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us.
My pleasure. And
go ahead.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me back once again. If you have more questions on this, you know, if you want to email me, that's fine. My email address is on there, or refer to those sources that you know, Glasser, read the article by Hertzberg, refer to the HBR stuff. There is you do have references, a reference list in there. Maslach, you know, she did the Maslach burnout inventory, so she's the authority on that sort of thing. So if you have specific questions on that, if you want more training on the choice theory and the reality therapy, you know, the lead management part of that, then please seek that out as well. There are places you can do that. So like I said, I may not have the answer to all of your questions, but hopefully somebody somewhere does, and you can find it within those resources.
Nice. You guys, I want to make sure everybody realizes that we do record these webinars. We post them to the YouTube channel, as Dr. Mottern had referred to earlier. It'll take me a few weeks to get it up there, but you'll receive the follow-up email tomorrow with the survey links and that kind of thing. That will have a link to Dr. Mottern's slides if you haven't already accessed them. You'll also receive a second follow-up email once that video is uploaded to YouTube. And you know, if you want to forward that information to your boss, you know, that's the best suggestion I can make, is if you have people that you think could benefit by this, you figure out a strategy to get it to them without insulting them. So y'all, thank you so very much for joining us, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.